And I think that Knicks fans should be super happy with the way this season went. Let's talk a little bit about the Knicks offseason now. There's not a crazy amount for the Knicks to like really truly do unless they want to dive into the star market. I know that I saw what Stephen A said after the game where he just immediately wants Julius Randle traded because his effort and intensity level can be contagious, essentially was the idea. And when his shot isn't falling, he can be a little bit less engaged defensively, let's go with. I think all that's true, by the way. I don't mind that. I don't think the take is false. But then he just mentions like they got to go get Damian Lillard. They got to go get Karl-Anthony Towns. First and foremost, two very different players, two very different skill sets, two very different like players in terms of playoff effectiveness, by the way. We're going to find out, I think, probably on lottery night, maybe. Maybe not on lottery night, but I think we're going to find out a potential for Damian Lillard to get traded on lottery night. If Portland wins the lottery and they end up with Victor Wembanyama, like that's a perfect setup for Lillard moving forward. You retain Jeremy Grant, you retain Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, you have Vic, you rock next year. I think you see where it takes you for sure with Dame. And I would bet that Dame would like be enthused by that. I would bet that he'd be excited to see where he can take that team. He's, unfortunately, since LaMarcus Aldridge moved on, he hasn't really had that truly great big man, it feels like. Yusuf Nurkic had a couple of okay years, but like they don't really have that, right? So I think it'd be difficult for the Knicks to trade for Damian Lillard. It would result in them having to give up an enormous amount of their draft capital moving forward. And by the way, like Damian Lillard definitely solves problems for them because Damian Lillard is unbelievable at basketball. But if you're the Knicks, and if you're Portland particularly, what are you acquiring in this deal from a salary ballast perspective as much as anything is kind of what I'm wondering. I don't really want Julius Randle back in a Damian Lillard deal. I don't know why I would want that, because if I'm moving Damian Lillard and I'm hopefully likely building around, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, and whoever I get back from the Knicks, high draft pick this year, whatever I can potentially get in a sign and trade for Jeremy Grant, Julius Randle doesn't really make sense for me at that point. So if you're the Blazers, what do the Knicks have that you truly, really want? I guess RJ Barrett, maybe? RJ Barrett had a good playoff run. He was terrible today. Went 1 for 10. He had a good playoff run. I wonder if maybe that would be intriguing. That gets you halfway there in terms of salary. Yvonne Fournier has a club option after the 2023-24 season. So it'd be like Barrett, Fournier, and then like what you try and get Quickly and Grimes in that deal. And then you try and get as many draft picks as possible, 3 or 4 draft picks. That's realistically what it's going to take to acquire Damian Lillard if you're the Knicks. I know that sounds like a lot, but we just saw what the price was for Kevin Durant. It was extensive and it was expansive. And I think Lillard, given that he's coming off of an all-NBA year, probably costs just as much, if only because we're in a star trade marketplace right now where there is a dearth of stars available. There are not many of them. And there is an exorbitant amount of teams that want them. Every team would love to have a star except for maybe the bottom 5. So that results in prices increasing because you don't really have a replacement option right now. If you don't acquire Damian Lillard, as Stephen A said, your replacement option might be Karl Towns. And that's a bad contract that you're acquiring. Karl Towns has shown very little in the playoffs in terms of his overall ability to make an impact. And oh, by the way, he's on $36 million next year. Sure. For the next 3 years, he makes $162 million before a player option that is $62 million in 2027, 28. That's not a deal that I want if I'm the Knicks. And I think the Knicks have done a great job of keeping the cap sheet open and keeping things flexible for potential stars that come available. If I'm them, I'm waiting for a star to come available that I love. I don't know if it's Damian Lillard, to be honest. I love Damian Lillard. He's, one of my 5 favorite players in the league. I think he's a stud. I think he's coming off of maybe his best season of his career. Damian Lillard, also 32 years old, and turns 33 in July, and has played 1 million minutes in his NBA career. And I think he's going to age well, because if there's one thing we know about Damian Lillard, it's that the work ethic is unbelievable. But does aging well mean 2 more great years? 3 more? I don't know. The other problem for the Knicks moving forward now, though, is that some of their young players are coming up on potential extensions that get expensive. Emmanuel Quickley is probably going to cost over $20 million a year. Could be more, to be honest. I think if he would hit the open market, he might get more than that, especially with the way the cap is going to rise moving forward. I think he's a long-term starting point guard in the NBA. He's an incredible defensive player. He is someone that I really, truly value in the league. I know he's coming off of a rough playoff run. I think he gets 20 million at the very least. Quentin Grimes is extension eligible next year. If Quentin Grimes takes another leap, you're ecstatic if you're the Knicks. But then you have to pay Quentin Grimes. And that would be starting in the 2025-26 year. The good news is that, Yvonne Fournier's money comes off the books next year. That will be helpful. Derrick Rose's money comes off the books this year. That will be helpful. But you have Julius Randle at 30. You have Jalen Brunson at 25. You have RJ Barrett at 25. By the way, the Knicks do a really good job, I think, of structuring their contracts. The Jalen Brunson deal actually decreases in value, which is going to be really important for them moving forward, especially with how the CBA structures potential extensions moving forward, where you can now offer up to 140% of a player's last year on his contract, which means in the case of Jalen Brunson, in that final year in 2025-26, they can probably offer him a contract starting in $32 million a year, which will probably be a fairly interesting offer, I would imagine, for him. Something in that ballpark. What you do with Randall is an interesting question. I don't know that I value him quite as much as, an all NBA level player in 2 of the last 3 years would make him seem to be. But his deal isn't terrible. I mean, he's on 28 million next year. He has a player option for 32 million in 2025-26. Ultimately, the only things I'm looking for here are the Knicks is if I can go find a star. It's also worth noting very briefly, Josh Hart has this weird mutual option where he has a player option at 12.96 and then a non-guarantee or something like that. It essentially operates as a mutual option. I would imagine the team works out a deal with Josh Hart. He's very, very close with Jalen Brunson, obviously. I would imagine that played a role in acquiring him, and they can actually stay under the tax if they offer Josh Hart something in the ballpark of a contract that starts at 17 million a year. I don't know if I want to pay 17 a year for Josh Hart necessarily, but if you're starting it and then like it's pretty flat or it decreases moving forward, again, they've structured their contracts like that previously. You could maybe get into a ballpark where it's like a what 4 year $60 million contract, $62 million contract in that ballpark. And that might be a pretty solid contract, I would think, for Josh Hart to sign. I would definitely retain Josh Hart if I was them. It's just hard to find the stars that are available right now, league wide. Two could eventually come available from Phoenix, if you consider Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton stars. But you have a great point guard in Jalen Brunson, and Chris Paul doesn't fit your age timeline. And then you already have Mitchell Robinson, who might be better than DeAndre Ayton right now. So those two don't really help you. Those could be two interesting potential trade targets. Bradley Beal could come available, maybe. Bradley Beal has something like 4 years left on his deal at $200 million, ballpark it. I don't know if I give up the world for Bradley Beal. I'd rather give up the world for Damian Lillard. But again, I don't know if they have the best offer on the table for Damian Lillard either. If you're trading Damian Lillard to the New York Knicks, who already have Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, probably, maybe Mitchell Robinson. That's going to be hard because those picks probably don't have crazy value at that point. Look, betting on the Knicks to flounder and fail in some regard hasn't been the worst strategy over the course of the last 20 years. But I think this front office is actually pretty good. And they're in an enormous market, and they have like a pretty good infrastructure, it feels like. If I'm moving Damian Lillard, I'm thinking I could get probably a better centerpiece than Emmanuel Quickly from somebody else. Which means the Knicks would just have to way over offer in terms of like future picks. They'd have to offer like 5 or 6 picks. And given the timeline for Damian Lillard, I don't know if I love that plan as a long-term strategy. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for the Knicks this offseason. And this front office has not been one that has chosen to skip steps throughout the course of its tenure. I think Leon Rose has been really smart about the way that he has gone about his business, about the way he's structured contracts, about the way that he has been very considerate in leaving himself outs and flexibility to set them up for success moving forward. So I say all of that to say, I don't think I would go and acquire Karl-Anthony Towns first and foremost. That doesn't seem interesting to me if I'm the Knicks. I also don't know if I'm excited by Damian Lillard. And I also don't know that I'm excited by Damian Lillard for them, but like I don't know that I'm paying the exorbitant price tag it would take. I think it's going to be a little bit tough. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for them than people think to find that star that's available on the market.